Maybe we'll get a full chapter of Anthony Richardson versus CJ Stroud this week. Crossover Thursday is back, and we're going to tell you who's winning this Sunday between the Colts and the Texans. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is a collaboration of your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts and Houston Texans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Like I said, Crossover Thursday is back. It's week one. We are all so back right now, baby. But it's me and Coty Davis of Locked On Texans. I am Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts. And we are taking you through this entire lineup today. We're going everything you need to know about Colts Texans, basically a rivalry already revisited. Week 18, the Texans got the better of the Colts, won the AFC South with the whole thing, went on to the playoffs, had a nice little showing there. So week one, revenge game for the Colts. They get it already. So, Coty, let's go ahead and why don't you tell me what the biggest storylines for the Texans are on both sides of the ball?
Well, the biggest storyline for the Houston Texans, of course, we're going to start on the offensive side, and that's basically incorporating Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs. As you guys know, the Houston Texans were extremely busy this offseason.
Very active.
I'm expecting big things for the Houston Texans. And look, I get it. A lot of people out there are looking at the Texans and they thinking to themselves that they may not live up to the expectations due to them having a tough schedule. However, I do believe outside of the Colts, I must say, but I do believe that the first, let's say, 4 to 5 games of the season, I think that's going to be very crucial, starting, of course, Sunday against you guys. That is going to be very crucial for the Houston Texans, because not only will they try to live up to those expectations, but you got to find a way to incorporate Stephon Diggs, and you got to find a way to incorporate Joe Mixon. And, starting with Stephon Diggs, look, I will say this. After watching this team for majority of training camp, watching him in preseason, I would say that I think it's going to be a lot easier to incorporate Stephon, because he has had an opportunity to go through the entire training camp, majority, all of the offseason training. And of course, I think he played, if I'm not mistaken, one preseason game. And, he had put in some work along with CJ, along with Nico, along with Tank, along with John, along with Hutchinson. Like, he has put in work and has spent some really good time with this organization, with this team, with his teammates, to see how is he going to fit in. However, I am a little bit concerned about Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon went down during the early part of training camp with an injury, missed majority, if not the rest of training camp. I think he came back the final weekend, and I really don't know if he's going to have an easier time trying to incorporate himself. I understand it. Look, of course, when you look at Joe Mixon, the number one thing for him is, can the big boys up front block for him? But at the same time, I do wonder the time that Joe Mixon off. I do wonder whether or not that's going to hinder his success, which means it may hinder the Houston Texans' success as well. That's the biggest storyline. And then on the defensive side of the ball, look, I know they haven't come out and said that officially, but the Houston Texans will be starting rookie Kamari Lassiter as CB2 and Caleb Bullock as your second safety. I'm now high on both of those guys. I did have my concerns, to say the least. However, I do want to see this defense, a defense that I'm projecting to be top 3 in the league, if not even better. I do want to see how those two rookies can incorporate themselves in helping the Houston Texans come away victorious come week 1.
I like that. That's a really good point I hadn't necessarily thought of with the offense. Because, last year I think the Colts caught the Texans at a good time where they were still trying to figure things out offensively, how to balance things with CJ Stroud in the run game. And so the Colts caught him at a good time and really took advantage of that. Could be the same case here. I mean, you've got a lot of big mouths to feed there. You have to figure out, the run game. You've probably got to change it a little bit compared to what it has been. I mean, Joe Mixon requires a little more attention now. than what it's been in the past. And then Stephon Diggs, again, it's a great problem to have. Deep receiving core, but Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I think the best argument is I'm going to throw it to the guy who's open. So the guy who has single coverage. Yeah, I mean that's his kind of get out of jail free card. So I love that argument. Hopefully for the Colts' sake, they're catching the Texans at a time where they're kind of figuring themselves out. And then they're on the defensive side of the ball. Really high praise. The Colts are kind of dealing with something similar, not dealing with something similar, but Nick Cross at safety, the other safety opposite of Julian Blackmon. That's a guy who received the lion's share of the first team reps at the other safety. You can't even call it free safety or strong safety because I think they're going to rotate a lot of those looks. But it wasn't until this week that Gus Bradley finally kind of gave up the ghost and said, yes, he's officially the starter. And then Latu, you mentioned you got a couple defensive backs, rookie defensive backs you're working in. Latu is not, I don't think he's going to be like the primary second defensive end, but I think he's going to see a ton of work. Like he's going to get a lot of work on passing downs. But Coty is probably, your mainstay defensive end. And then it's going to be a lot of Tyquan Lewis, Latu, and Dio Adengbo kind of rotating through there at the other defensive end spot. So a lot of teams on both sides trying to figure things out. I talked to Shane Steichen about that this week. We asked him, this is the most recent opponent you faced, but surely the game plan can't be the same. And he pointed out, the Houston has a bunch of dudes on that team. They got some really good players. He specifically mentioned them adding Danielle Hunter. And they've historically been kind of an underrated defense. Like they may not always rank super high by the end of the year, but especially coached by DeMeco Ryans, you always have got to bring your A game and be prepared for pretty much everything.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say about this defense, like I said, I'm expecting it to be top 3. Like I say, even better. And we sit here talking about figuring out, but I'm also interested to see how Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter will play off each other because look, Danielle Hunter is also a big name, but of course he get kind of lost in the shuffle. But that's one thing I am interested in seeing, and I think this very first game is just going to be Coach DeMeco Ryans, Bobby Sloyd, kind of similar to what they did during week 2 last year when you guys came into Houston and beat them. They was trying to figure it out. And of course, as we all know, the second half, the Houston Texans started to put things together on both sides of the ball, and they was able to use that in order to have the season that they had last year. And I think it's going to be the same here as well, but once again, man, just looking at Diggs and Joe Mixon, big names, productive players. Don't know about you. I say this a lot on Locked On Texans. I've always considered Stephon Diggs top 10 wide receiver over the past decade. But it's like, okay, now how is he going to incorporate himself within an offense? Look, even though they have a projected top 5 quarterback, it's still going to be important for everybody to be on the same accord moving forward.
Yeah, he kind of gave a pretty feisty version of that answer recently in an interview. But, this is 2 teams where it seems like there's a lot of newness. Obviously the Texans brought in a lot of outside guys. The Colts, it feels like a new team just because of how many guys they're getting back from injury. But they, in terms of free agency and everything, they're running it back. They pretty much brought in all of their own guys, only bringing in 2 free agents, but they're backups. So, coming up here in a moment, we're going to talk about, a little bit more specifically with the Colts and what this game plan might look like. Now, a word from our friends at PrizePicks. Let me tell you, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you a win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. That's 4 weeks of free W's. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. I personally drafted Caleb Williams in my home league. We're doing Superflex this year, so I feel really good about that as him as my QB2. If I'm going over, I can enjoy those spoils on PrizePicks as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as few as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy also. So that means your lineups stay in, your players stay in lineups, even if one of them gets injured. Because, I mean, life isn't fair, especially when you're throwing your money around and betting, and PrizePicks acknowledges that. So again, if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks means you still have those players alive. This is a good matchup. Is CJ Stroud going to absolutely torch this questionable Colts secondary? Coty thinks so. He's not in there. You can go and pick more than or less than on Stroud stat projections. What about Anthony Richardson running it effectively against Houston again, more or less on his rushing yards projection? So go check out this matchup. I'm sure those lines are bound to move by the time kickoff gets here. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And more exciting stuff. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day featuring our counterparts over in the AFC South. First up, it's the madman Tyler Rowland. He kicks you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. If you don't get that reference, Tyler is all energy. He is a great listen. And then you got to stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts and you get unprecedented NFL insight. Hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Coty. So let me try and spit some truths about the Colts here. I'll be as objective as I can be. So on the offensive side of the ball, everything is about Anthony Richardson right now. I kind of have this labeled, all right, let's try the Anthony Richardson experience again. Because we only got a small taste of it last year. Obviously, it was nice against the Texans for about a quarter or so. He had 2 15-plus yard rushing touchdowns before leaving the game with a concussion.
Oh, my God, he looked good.
He did. But we'll see what it looks like at the start of this. I think the best part for the Colts is that the offense is fully open. So anything the Colts want to try and do, they trust Anthony Richardson to do it. You also, I mentioned earlier, you get a lot of guys back healthy. Obviously, Richardson is number one, but also Jonathan Taylor, who does historically well against the Texans. Just back in week 18, he had 170, 180 yards. So
$188.
Yeah. The last time we saw Jonathan Taylor, he was still very much Jonathan Taylor. And that's not the first big game he's had against Houston. So you've got Richardson, you've got Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr. is there. Alec Pierce should get a shot in the arm because he now has a quarterback that is willing to look for him deep. That's kind of where his bread is buttered. When he has a guy like Matt Ryan, Gardner Minshew, those guys, he's rendered almost useless because that's not his game. He doesn't mesh well with those guys. A.D. Mitchell is a very shiny new toy to have there in the second round. He's a big play receiver, can do a lot of acrobatic things, can win downfield. I would find it highly doubtful that Josh Downs plays in this game. Hasn't practiced yet, and he got injured at the beginning of August. So if for some reason he goes out and practices tomorrow and they feel that he's no longer rusty, sure, but he only just now got back on the field for rehab running routes. So I would find it pretty far-fetched to think that Downs is going to play. But they do still have 3 explosive guys out there, so that's good to see. And then again, the run game, obviously. So what does this offense look like? What do they want to try and do? Obviously, Jonathan Taylor seems like the best mode of attack. He always does very well. And it doesn't matter who the opponent is. That's a guy you always want to get rolling. But I'm interested to see if Houston lines up to stop Taylor, how effective is Richardson still after that? Because, he is his own threat to run the ball, but also he has the confidence to throw the ball wherever he wants on the field. So I think that's the biggest key offensively. And then on the defensive side of the ball, so here in Indy, every Colts fan has been screaming about the secondary all offseason. You could see the cornerback group that it probably needed another veteran added to it. And then the safety group, probably at least a couple guys added to it. the Colts have stood firm and said, we like the guys we have. We intentionally went young. We're going to let these guys play it out. But you immediately look at a matchup like this one in week 1, and it's like, guys, CJ Stroud torched the Colts for a 76-yard touchdown on the first play week 18. Like, this is not a dude to test things out against. Like, he is that dude. So is Stroud going to torch the Colts secondary? I think it's going to be fully up to the defensive front this week. So they had 51 sacks last year, which is an Indianapolis era record, and it was top 5 in the NFL. But they did go long stretches without even getting, hits on the quarterback. And, the first week when Houston, or the first matchup when Houston had no offensive lineman out there, they got 7 sacks like they should have. But then when Houston was a little more put together, they had better health, only 2 sacks in week 18. They've got to have some sort of medium in there. The 7 sacks is probably not going to happen again in this matchup, but they got to be able to get to CJ Stroud a little more often. I asked Laiatu Latu about that today, and he said if we can disrupt Stroud and consistently, harass him and get after him, then I think we'll win. They know it's a must in this matchup because a guy like CJ, to me, he's turned into one of those Patrick Mahomes guys. Like, if he gets out of the pocket and is doing stuff, he has that ad-lib ability to make you pay. I already see him as one of the better off-script quarterbacks in the league. So I think you have to get to him and finish the play. I don't think pressuring him is enough. You have to really get him rattled. So kind of a tall task for the Colts defense. But I think the pass rush is going to have to be an absolute must in this one.
It's funny that you're talking about the pass rush because I do consider the Houston Texans offensive line as the biggest key for them. That's going to determine whether or not they win this game. And look, in the first segment, I talked about how they're going to incorporate Stephon Diggs, how they're going to incorporate Joe Mixon. But at the end of the day, I just look at those big guys up front. And for me personally, look, first and foremost, let me just say this. DeForest Buckner, dog. Let's just go ahead and say it. And, I know week 18, as you just alluded to, they only got to CJ Stroud. What was it, like 2 sacks that you said?
Yeah.
But I would like to go on record and say, look, the Houston Texans offensive line, yes, it was a hell of a lot better than it was doing when they first saw him in week 2. That offensive line at that point was already set. You already know who your left tackle, your left guard, your center, your right tackle, and your right guard. You already know they already had a sense of camaraderie amongst that group right there, especially somebody as a guy that I miss, George Fant. Not only was he my guy in the locker room, but he was also a really good backup, especially once Titus Howard went down. Now you're looking at it from a standpoint. This offensive line, they haven't really had that much time spent together. I mean, Laramie Tunsil, he's always going to be one of the top left tackles in the game. However, he missed half a training camp, even though he's healthy now. But it's like, okay, how are you going to play next to Kenyon Green, someone who did not play the entire season? And even though he has looked better during training camp, better during preseason, I think this is going to be a comeback season for that young man. This is the real deal now. And for him, not only him, but a second-year prospect and Juice Ruggs, those 2 guys are going to have to find a way to stop the Indianapolis Colts front 4, which I consider one of the best in the league. So it's like, okay, what's going to happen with this offensive line? And look, I always say that Titus Howard is one of the most underrated tackles in the game. However, he missed majority of last season, and I do wonder how much of some of the struggles that we may see during these first couple of games, especially on Sunday, how much of that is going to be rust. So it's like, as long as the Houston Texans offensive line can keep the pocket clean for CJ, as long as they have an opportunity to create gaps for Joe Mixon to execute, I think the Houston Texans are going to be fine. However, it's very scary when you have someone like Buckner on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, and you're looking at it from a standpoint, okay, this might not end well if all 5 of those guys are not on the same accord. So that's the biggest key on the offensive side of the ball. And on the defensive side of the ball, you already alluded to it, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, At this point, it's like, can you at least contain him? Like, just don't worry about stopping him. Just contain him. And look, what he did week 18, a $188, 30 carries, it was a phenomenal performance to watch.
Mhm.
And I look at the Houston Texans, the defensive line. I looked at the Houston Texans, front seven. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, if they could find a way to contain Jonathan Taylor, they're going to be okay. Because if you take a look at the Houston Texans defense last season, they did a really good job revamping their entire run defense. However, once you started playing alongside Jonathan Taylor, you let somebody go almost 200 yards on you. So that's a little bit concerning. But not only is it concerning as stopping Jonathan Taylor, now you're looking at it from a standpoint, okay, I get it. I know a lot of people. I saw the preseason game too. Anthony Richardson did not look that good per se. However, I don't care if he only played 3.5, 4 games last year. I already consider him one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the game. And he showed me when I set up inside NRG Stadium and watched him torch the Houston Texans, especially with his legs. Not only do the Texans got to worry about containing Jonathan Taylor, but you also got to find a way to contain Anthony Richardson, who I get it. It was a small sample size, but he still looked like he could develop into arguably one of this league's best dual threat quarterbacks. So I think a lot is going to be on the place for the Houston Texans. And I look at week 18, I'm like, look, you let Jonathan Taylor, demolish you in the run game, and that was without Anthony Richardson. Now we're looking at a situation where we're going to see what a rushing attack with Richardson and Taylor are going to look like together. That might be a small issue for the Texans. I can't lie.
Yeah, no, they got 2 snaps together last year, so we're going to see what it looks like when they get at least a full game together, hopefully, knock on wood. Well, coming up next, guys, we're going to tell you how we think this game shakes out. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board either, because they actually help hire professionals who you can't find anywhere else, even if there are people who aren't actively searching for new jobs but might be open to the perfect role elsewhere. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even use other leading job sites. So if you're not using LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They know that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or resources to hire, so they're constantly finding new ways to make the process even easier for you. LinkedIn even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions. It makes the process even easier and quicker, and it's just one reason why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And Crossover Thursdays presented by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play 5. Again, you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, so Coty, I'll go ahead and roll out the red carpet here. What are the 3 most important keys that are going to lead to a Houston Texans victory?
I'm going to start with the most important one that I just finished talking about, the offensive line, keeping the pocket clean and creating gaps for the Houston Texans offense to execute. And talk about the Houston Texans offense to execute. You're looking at CJ Stroud. You already talked about how questionable the Colts secondary is. So, I think this is a game where CJ Stroud should just air it out, especially considering that you got not 1, not 2, but 3 wide receivers who could be quote unquote wide receiver, 1. So yeah. I think this is definitely a game where you could just let CJ just go to work. I'm going to love it, I must say. And then, of course, last but not least, but, containing Jonathan Taylor, that's always been the key for the Houston Texans, where it don't matter if they're rebuilding, fighting for a playoff spot, or contending for a championship. They could never figure that key out. So, of course, that key still got to stand. Stop Jonathan Taylor at all costs.
I like it. All right, so for the Colts, first on offense, I'm going to say they got to cash in the red zone, because I mentioned Josh Downs probably not going to play in this one. One that's perhaps even more consequential is their kicker, Matt Gay, is probably not going to play in this one either. Neither player has practiced all week. So kicker, whether we like it or not, it's very important. So if Matt Gay isn't out there kicking, even if he is out there kicking, he just had a hernia procedure. So that's not great. If he doesn't go out there, they have a rookie undrafted free agent and Spencer Schrader kicking. So their kicking game is going to be shaky at best, I would say. So when you're in the red zone, you got to turn those into 6s instead of 3s. Ball security for the offense as well, and that goes towards communication too. So Anthony has a bit of a tendency to know that he's the best athlete on the field, and sometimes that can get him in trouble, especially if you've got a pass rusher breathing down his neck. If he's not holding onto the ball properly, he will fumble it. He has fumbled before last year. He's fumbled in the preseason. He's got to take care of the ball because, I mean, you can't have a 360-degree vision around your head. So just make sure that the ball is fine. But also in terms of communication as well. You mentioned that preseason Bengals game. It didn't look good. But in context, a lot of that was communication between him and the receivers. The pick six, the tight end was supposed to be further inside. Anthony threw it where it was supposed to be, but the tight end wasn't there. We saw that led to a pick six. Immediately 6 points for the other team. That can't happen. There was another crucial third down where he threw over the middle of the field, but it was way in front of A.D. Mitchell. Now, Mitchell, when he came out of his break, there was the defense had a coverage he didn't recognize back there or he wasn't expecting. So it caused him to kind of hitch and hiccup a little bit coming out of his break. That kind of stuff, you just got to keep running through it because Anthony, again, threw it right where it was. So that kind of stuff, they got lucky with an errant throw over the middle of the field that wasn't intercepted. So that stuff has got to get cleaned up. And then defensively, the secondary already, as is, I mentioned, it's going to be a little worrisome. Just be where you need to be. Because we saw a couple of examples in that Week 18 win for the Texans that gave them the AFC South. Obviously, that C.J. Stroud to Nico Collins bomb on the first play of the game. There was supposed to be safety help over the top, but there was no communication there, so the safety was not there. It left the corner on an island with Collins, and that was never supposed to happen. We saw it was a touchdown. And then there was a touchdown to the fullback there, like near the goal line, where there's a breakdown in communication again between the safeties and the cornerbacks. Nobody was right there to pick up that fullback, and he was alone in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. If you're just where you're supposed to, like, this game's already hard enough against a quarterback like CJ Stroud. If you just be where you're supposed to be and don't blow the coverages and everything, your life is probably not going to be as difficult. So to me, a lot of it is mental, and then also execution in the red zone on offense for me. So with all that said, do you have a score prediction for us, Coty?
Yeah, I got a score prediction. I think it's still, like normal. It's going to be close, but I got the Houston Texans winning game 1, 21-17.
Okay. So this is a game that could have a lot of offensive fireworks, but it sounds like you think the defenses might step up a little bit.
Yeah, the defense, I can see them stepping up, but again, it's week 1, a lot of quote unquote new faces, with the Houston Texans. I know with you guys, a lot of guys coming back from injury, i.e. the most important one, Anthony Richardson, and I think that's where we're probably going to see like a couple head scratches. And like you mentioned, if anything, it's probably just going to be more so communication type stuff. And, week 1 games sort of, go down that kind of rabbit hole. Now, once again, I think the Houston Texans defense will have an opportunity to hold their own, especially the defensive line in terms of, especially the front seven actually in terms of, trying to contain Jonathan Taylor. But overall, I think it's still going to be a close game because I think it's safe to say that this could be a rivalry, not just CJ and Richardson, but this could be a rivalry between these two franchises that might last a minute. And even though they never liked each other before, I think all the trash talk throughout the offseason rubs some players the wrong way in the Colts locker room. And I think, they're going to come in with an extra chip on their shoulder.
I do think they would like to win. I think this will be a close one as well, but I'm a little more confident in the offenses right now. Both sides have quite a few weapons. I think that'll be tough for Houston to defend. And then obviously I think it's going to be tough for the Colts to defend as well. Houston just has so many weapons. I do have the Texans winning this one, 30-27. Again, a really close one. I mentioned the kicker battle. That's a 3-point game. It could be as simple as a missed field goal somewhere throughout the game. But in general, for the Colts, let's just be optimistic and say that their secondary gets it together at some point in the year. I don't know if week 1 is going to be the time that it happens. So I think the secondary might need a few weeks to gel together. And then will the kicking woes raise their head in this one? Because, even with Matt Gay out there, he has been in a little bit of a slump dating back to late last season. So the Colts, their secondary is very questionable. We have to see them have success before we believe it's going to happen. And then their kicking game has been kind of a very iffy situation, again, dating back to late last season. So one thing I do know, it's going to be an entertaining battle. I think we're all looking forward to the Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud rivalry get going on. I know they're friends and they're not on the same field at the same time, but it's going to be really exciting. That's 2 young star quarterbacks. We already know CJ Stroud is that dude. He just won Rookie of the Year. Anthony Richardson looked, explosive at times in his 4-game sample size last year. But this does have the makings to be one of the most entertaining rivalries in the NFL. So we're all going to see, Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern kick, 12 p.m. Central. Don't forget, our friends over at Locked On NFL are now 2 shows every day, featuring Tyler Rowland in the morning and then Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk afterward. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you guys don't already, please be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. You guys have a great night, and with that, we will see you guys tomorrow.